And our last speaker today is Nora Walsh. Nora is from Milton, Tennessee, and has a master's degree in chemistry from Emory University and a master's degree in secondary education, science education from the University at Tennessee in Chattanooga. She spent 2 years teaching in Chattanooga before getting married and moving to Evansville 10 years ago when she joined Reitz High School. She teaches Chemistry 1, Honors Chemistry, and AP Chemistry, and also serves as the Freshman Orientation Coordinator and is a co-coach of the Reitz Academic Super Bowl team for science. She has also been an adjunct instructor at USI in both the chemistry and education departments. She has 2 future Panthers at home, a soon-to-be second grader at West Terrace and a preschooler at USI. Her husband is an organic chemistry professor at USI. And to answer your burning question, yes, they do talk about things other than chemistry at the supper table. Please welcome Nora Walsh.
Isn't it funny how much advice we get in beginnings in life? When you get married, the first year's the hardest. When you have a baby, the first year's the hardest. And for most of us in this room, when you start teaching, the first year's the hardest. In all these beginnings, we get advice. Much of it is useful, and it all comes from a good place. But I think we can all agree that not all of it works for everybody. I still remember a piece of advice I got from a veteran teacher when I told her I was going to start teaching in the fall. No matter what you do, don't smile until you're at least through the first quarter. Now, this bothered me because I naturally smile and joke a lot. She went on to explain, if you lose a class, they're gone forever. But you can always lighten up. I think a lot of us will agree with her on that, but what I've discovered in my classroom is the way you get a class is not by making them afraid of you. It's by making them feel that you know them and that they know you. I came into teaching because I love working with teens. My favorite part of my job is not delivering content, although I do enjoy that. My favorite part of my job is talking with my students. I'll talk to them about anything they want. I come in on Monday morning. How was your weekend? I talk to them about my life. They know my children's names. Actually, that sometimes freaks out my children because we'll see one of these big kids when we're out and they'll call them by name and ask them if they had fun at the Children's Museum last weekend. So, the joy is what comes from that. When you talk to your students about your life, they start to talk to you about theirs. And they'll tell you stuff. They'll tell you how they're so excited because they're finally getting their own room. They're 16 years old, and they're finally getting their own room for the first time in their life because they have 6 brothers and sisters. They'll tell you that they found the most perfect prom dress, and you just have to see the pictures. You know you want to see the pictures, right? The front and the side, and here's the back again, and from the other way. And you tell them how pretty they look. But that's an easy thing to say because they look that pretty every day. And then they'll come running into your room during lunch with tears streaming down their face. And they'll ask you why people can be so mean and why high school can be so hard. And you tell them it's because people are jealous of their inner and outer beauty. And if you're lucky, they'll leave smiling, even if just for one moment. So, to somebody who may not know, this sounds like it's not part of my job. What does all that have to do with teaching chemistry? But here's the thing. Research has shown, time and again, the students that feel connected to their teachers do better. They just do better. They want to do better. They want to do better for you. And what I found is that when my students feel they've let me down, they come apologize. I'll do better next time, I promise. Students just do better when they feel they have a relationship with the teacher. I've seen this with my own son. So he just finished first grade at West Terrace, and he's had 2 amazing teachers that he truly knew loved him. He came home every day this year, first grade, talking about how much he loved Mrs. Roberts. And I could tell every time I met her that she loved him and loved teaching her students. And in her class this year, he jumped 2 grade levels in reading. But he wouldn't have had such a wonderful experience with Mrs. Roberts if Mrs. Gooch had not cared about him the year before. So A lot of you elementary teachers, you probably know this, but when they come into kindergarten, they do a reading assessment early on in the year. Liam tested in the yellow level, which is kind of caution, which was really confusing to us because he loved to read. So we met with her just 3 weeks into the school year. And this amazing teacher had already figured out about my son that he wouldn't tell her an answer if he wasn't positive he was right. So we worked with her, and she let him know that she cared about him and that it was okay. And we helped him to figure out that being wrong is not bad. That's how you learn. And by the end of the year, Liam tested in the blue level for reading, ahead of his grade. So, between my experiences in my own classroom with my own students and my experience as a parent with my son, I've been working to make sure that my students feel comfortable in my classroom and that they enjoy coming to class. And the 2014-2015 school year was no different, except that it was. You know when you have that magic mix of kids and everything just clicks? Yeah, every single class I had was like that. They just clicked. It was so much fun. I had a great time at work. There was this one class, this one group of kids. They were all amazing. But my sixth period seemed to really enjoy asking me about my life. Now, I think it's because they didn't want to do chemistry. But they would ask me questions and get my advice. They came to call them life lessons. They started calling me Mama. That freaked my kids out too. That class was really fun. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of joking, a lot of questions, a lot of discussion, and some of that was even about chemistry. And there was this one student in that class, we've all got that one student, and he just liked to mess with me, Logan Brown. He seemed to take it as his personal mission to get me off topic. He asked tons of questions, and most of them were not related to chemistry. And we had some great conversations stem from his questions. And sometimes I just had to talk on over him. But no matter how much fun he had trying to derail class, and how I sometimes struggled to get us back on track, he would still come in homeroom, talk about how he wanted to be a pilot, talk about what he'd seen on the news that day, just talk. He loved to talk. Talk to anyone that would listen. I told anyone that would listen it was the best year of teaching I had ever had. I loved my job. The other thing that happens when you start something new is people tell you truths. I find them to be more reliable than advice because they're reality, they're not perceptions. And I had this distinct honor of working with a teacher who was in her 35th year of teaching during my first. Stop and do that math for a minute because she just retired last year after 47 years. Hashtag teacher goals. And she told me a lot of great truths. One thing she told me that I still hold on to this day is if it has to get done, it will. That's really comforting at the end of a quarter. Another truth that I got from Bertha was if you teach long enough, one of your students will die. In the early morning hours of Sunday, March 15th, 2015, I started getting messages from my students. Mrs. Walsh, I thought you'd want to know that Logan Brown was killed by a drunk driver last night. I sat up in bed in complete disbelief. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. But as message after message after message came my way, I knew it must be true. I spent much of that Sunday online and on the phone, and all I could think was, I need to be with my students. Monday morning, I walked into school, bracing myself for what I was sure would be the hardest day of teaching I'd ever had. And as I crossed the street, Logan's best friend was standing on the sidewalk. They hadn't been best friends until that year, until my sixth period class. And I walked over to him, and we just stood there, hugging and crying together. There was a gathering around the flagpole in his honor, and I went, and I watched the pain show itself on their faces. I just wanted to be there for them. I needed them to be there for me. You know, we have a really amazing crisis response team here in EVSC, and they were there, And I went during first period, my plan, looking for my sixth period kids. But they weren't there. I talked to a crisis team member. I talked to my friend Sue, who's a counselor at Reitz. And it helped, but it wasn't what I needed. I needed my kids. I didn't have sixth period that day, and I was going crazy not knowing where they were and how they were doing. He had been such a visible, vital, and vocal part of our class that I knew that they would all be impacted by this. But I didn't know how to go about finding them. But then the impact of this relationship we had been building all year, this class and I, truly showed itself to me. I didn't have to find them. They came to find me. I was standing in the hallway before passing period, before homeroom, and there they were, walking down the hallway towards me in pairs by themselves. I have this rug in my room under the windows. We sat there, we talked, we cried. We tried to piece together how this awful thing could possibly have happened. We talked about the other two students in the car, how they were doing what we'd heard. We held hands, and we hugged, and we were together. And that is what we all needed. Most of those students spent almost all of that day in my room. The counselors knew they were there, message teachers. It wasn't a normal day at Reitz anyway. We made stress balls out of balloons in true science teacher fashion. I had them do different fillings and compare them, and tell me their favorite is flour, FYI. The next day was a day I truly dreaded. Many of my students spent all that day in my room too. They needed to be together. They needed to be safe. They needed to not be in the hallway with hundreds of people asking them how they were. And then, sixth period. An empty seat. And it was very obvious because Logan never missed class. The ones that challenge you, they never do. It's true. And that class had never been more quiet. Actually, they'd never been quiet. And I got up to talk, and I couldn't get through it. And I started to cry. And Logan's best friend, he stood up, and he walked over to me, and he just hugged me. And then another, and another, and then we were all there. All 20 of us were in this giant group hug, holding each other and crying. And I will never, ever forget that moment or that feeling. It was magical. It felt like hope. 2 days later was the funeral. As I got ready, I started getting messages from my students. Are you on your way? Let me know when you get here. Come find me. And then I got a message from Sue. Come in the door on the left. I'm with your students. So I went straight to them. We sat together. And gradually they all came. And my biggest wish during that funeral was that I had more hands. I couldn't hold their hands like I wanted to. And as sad as the funeral of a young person is, there was an extra layer of pain for me beyond my own sorrow. The pain was in watching their faces. I couldn't do enough for them. I didn't have enough hands. The next week was spring break, and we all got a much-needed week to sort through our thoughts and our feelings on our own. And when we came back, we could laugh again. But it was different. We were different. We had walked through a difficult time together, and we were family. We will forever all be impacted by how we came together. So, one of the last conversations I had with Logan Brown, he joked about egging my house. He just found out where I lived, which was petrifying. So my sixth-period family decided that in his honor, they needed to egg my house, which I did not agree with. So we compromised. On Easter afternoon, they came to my house and Easter egged it. So these relationships you build with your students, they matter. They matter like a lot of other things in teaching matters. Knowing your content matters. Effective lesson design matters. Planning and pacing matter. Preparing students for testing matters. Curriculum maps, formative assessments, PLCs, grading projects, room design, it all matters. But these relationships you build with your students, they matter in a way that's important to them that you may not even ever know. And sometimes they become vital in ways you could never possibly anticipate. Remember what Maya Angelou said? People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And our people are our students. And don't worry, it's worth the time investment, no matter how short your time may feel in class. Your test scores will improve. You'll enjoy your job more. Your days will just fly by. And your students will do a lot for you if they feel that you care about them. They'll keep your room neater. They'll ask you for help. They'll make you laugh. They'll support you when you need them to. They'll even show up to your talk in the middle of their summer break.
Thank you. Thank you, Nora.